It started with a sound. Not an explosion. Not a scream. Just one sharp voice cutting through the warm Dallas air. Step out of the car. Now. The words didn't ask. They commanded. They sliced through the hum of early morning traffic like a razor through silk. Inside the driver's seat of a sleek matte gray coupe, Darius Miles Jordan blinked once. Calm. Composed. The car's interior smelled like premium leather and quiet power, fresh from the design floor of Jordan Motors HQ. He didn't speak. He didn't flinch. His hands rested on the steering wheel, wrist peeking out from a tailored blazer, timepiece gleaming under the Texas sun. Outside the car, the officer's voice came again, louder this time. I said now. Within seconds, phones started rising. Bystanders gathered on the sidewalk like magnets to a storm. The words, live, and recording, flickered across a dozen screens. The story was already writing itself, and no one knew the ending. Yet, Darius exhaled. Slowly. Like a man who's done this before. Not this exact scenario, but the rhythm of suspicion. The choreography of being doubted, questioned, cornered. For daring to exist in a space someone thinks you don't belong. He reached for the glove box. Carefully. Deliberately. Hands where I can see them, barked the officer, his hand now gripping the holster like it held justice itself. The air thickened. Like before a summer thunderstorm. That's when the voice came. You really expect me to believe you own this? And that, right there, was the real crime. Not a stolen car. Not forged papers. Just a black man behind the wheel of something too expensive, too exclusive, too impossible. Darius didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He reached into his inner pocket, pulled out a matte black business card, and placed it silently on the hood. What's this? The officer snapped. Darius looked him dead in the eye. You'll want to read it. Because in less than 60 seconds, everything was about to change. And no one, not the officer, not the crowd, not the live stream viewers across the country, was ready for what that card would reveal. Not even close. Just 90 minutes earlier, Darius Miles Jordan had stepped into Trinity Motors like any other high-end customer. The dealership sat in the heart of uptown Dallas. Glass walls, polished marble floors, scent diffusers pumping out something expensive and vague, like citrus on top of money. The receptionist barely looked up. Her smile paused halfway when her eyes met his. It wasn't shock, it was calculation. Like she was trying to figure out how he belonged. He didn't need to prove anything. Not today. He wore a clean navy button-down, dark jeans, and Oxfords buffed to a quiet gleam. No logos. No labels. No need. He walked past the cappuccino bar, past a white couple holding hands and whispering. They shifted slightly when he passed. Not enough to be obvious. But enough. Darius had seen it all before. In airports, on golf courses, at board meetings where his title was mistaken for the name of a guest. He made his way toward the showcase floor where the newest electric concept vehicle from Jordan Motors, his company, sat under a spotlight. Gunmetal matte finish. Sleek angles. V6 twin electric motor, 480 horsepower. A beast disguised as beauty. He wasn't there for photos. He was there for pickup. The sales manager approached with a kind of smile that tried to balance charm with suspicion. Slicked back hair. Gucci loafers. Clipboard tucked under one arm like it held authority. Looking for something pre-owned? The manager asked, not even glancing at the car. Darius smiled faintly. No. I'm here to pick this one up. VIN #3780Z. Should be under Jordan. A pause. Then the performance began. The smile faded. Fingers tapped the keyboard. A pause. Then the manager looked at the ID card Darius handed him. Paused again. Eyes flicked to the name. Back to Darius. Then back to the screen. Oh, the man said. Just that. Like something had misaligned. You're Mr. Jordan. It wasn't a question, but it was. The next few minutes were coldly efficient. No congratulations, no enjoy the ride, no showroom photo like they did for other customers. Just a signature, a handoff, and a look that said, how? As Darius took the keys, a young staffer nearby, Rosa, watched it all. She didn't say anything then, but her fingers gripped the folder in her arms just a little tighter. She saw what happened. She remembered. And later, She would be the one to change everything. The engine barely had time to warm up. Darius pulled out of the Trinity Motors parking garage, the sun climbing higher over Dallas skyline. The electric hum of the prototype was smooth, nearly silent, more glide than growl. He paused at the first light. A couple of pedestrians glanced over. One man actually stopped and pointed. That was the thing about driving something no one else had. A concept car wasn't just a ride. It was a statement. Green. He eased into the intersection, headed toward Lemon Avenue. No rush, no music, just the low whisper of tires on pavement. His mind drifted. Maybe he'd grab coffee. Maybe he'd swing by HQ. That thought died quick. Behind him, a sudden pop of red and blue lights lit up his rearview mirror. Then came the sound. The siren. Short, sharp, and unmistakable. Darius didn't panic. He slowed, pulled to the right, and parked along a clean curb near Turtle Creek. The kind of area where Bentleys didn't turn heads, but where he still somehow did. He rolled down the window. A Dallas PD cruiser pulled up fast. Lights still spinning. A white officer stepped out. Mid-50s, square jaw, mirrored sunglasses, swagger born from decades of being obeyed without question. He didn't approach with a smile. He didn't introduce himself. Just walked up, slow and deliberate, like he already knew the script. "You in a hurry, sir?" the officer asked, voice clipped. "No, sir," Darius replied, calm. "Just picked up my new car." That's when the shift happened. The officer's chin lifted slightly. His hand dropped to rest on his holster, not threatening, but not casual either. "This car?" he asked, nodding at the coupe. "You're saying this is yours?" "I am." "You got proof of that?" Darius nodded, reaching slowly toward the glove box. He'd been trained for this, not by the world, but by experience. But before he could even open it, the officer barked. "Hands where I can see them." His voice had changed. Louder now. Sharper. Like suspicion had just found its footing. Darius paused. Raised both hands slightly. No sudden moves. "Sir, I'm just..." he began. "Step out of the vehicle." Just like that. From luxury to liability. From proud owner to potential suspect. The officer's fingers twitched near the radio on his shoulder. Backup, no doubt, was only seconds away. And somewhere nearby, phones were already recording. The moment Darius stepped out of the car, the energy on the block changed. It wasn't loud at first. Just quiet tension, like air holding its breath. The officer stepped in close. Not aggressive, yet, but close enough to make a point. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." Darius blinked. "Excuse me." "You heard me," the officer snapped. "You're being detained. Possible vehicle theft." A murmur rippled from across the sidewalk. People had started to gather. One woman in yoga gear slowed her jog. A man exiting a nearby deli paused mid-bite on his breakfast sandwich. The phones came out. Some discreet. Some blatant. "Startin' the day with this nonsense again," someone muttered. Darius didn't resist. That's not how he'd been raised. That's not how he'd survived. He turned slowly. Placed his hands behind his back. Click. Cold steel around his wrists. Tight. His custom blazer bunched at the shoulders. The seams tugged as the officer pushed his arms upward just enough to sting. Another squad car pulled up. Younger officer this time, maybe late 20s. Hesitated as he stepped out. His eyes scanned the scene, landing on Darius, the car, then his senior. No questions asked. Just followed the lead. They began the pat-down. In public. On a weekday morning. On a man wearing a $6,000 suit. A man who hadn't raised his voice, hadn't made a sudden move, hadn't done a damn thing wrong. From across the street, someone shouted, "Why are y'all doing that? He showed you papers." Another added, "Man, he ain't resisting." But no one stepped in. Not yet. Darius clenched his jaw. He stared straight ahead as one officer unbuckled his belt, checked his pockets, lifted his blazer. "Sir, you need to stay calm," the first officer warned. "I am calm," Darius answered, his voice like granite. "But this is far from it." The cameras didn't stop rolling. Someone on TikTok already had a live stream going, captioned, "Dallas cops cuff black man in luxury car." No reason given. A kid on a bike stood by a stop sign, whispering into his phone, "Yo, this gonna go viral." And then came the line that cracked something deep inside Darius. "You don't look like someone who drives one of these," the officer said, loud enough for the crowd to hear, like it was part of the show. The crowd gasped. Phones zoomed in. And Darius? He exhaled. Deep. Silent. Not broken. But building. "You don't look like someone who drives one of these." The words hit like a slap. Not just to Darius, but to every bystander with a camera in hand and a conscience in their chest. It wasn't just an insult. It was a sentence. A verdict. Passed down without trial. Without pause. The officer didn't whisper it. He said it like it belonged in the air. Like it was obvious. Like everyone should agree. And some did. Not out loud. But in the silence. In the way a few people looked away, suddenly finding their phones too interesting to keep filming. In the way the younger officer's eyes flickered, then dropped to the ground. Darius stood still. His jaw tightened. His shoulders straightened. But he didn't speak. Because when a man tells you what he sees, you learn more about him than about yourself. "You fit the profile," the officer added. "Not executive. More like rental fraud." That was the moment the crowd changed. A woman in a green blazer, standing near a street vendor, shook her head in disgust. "Ma, that's what we're doing now," she said to no one in particular, but loud enough for everyone to hear. A young guy with a man bun mumbled, "He's got more class in that blazer than both those cops combined." Another voice said, "You sure that's not Darius Jordan? That dude looks familiar." Darius heard it all, but stayed silent. He'd spent his whole life preparing for moments like this. Not by fighting, but by becoming undeniable. The suit, the composure, the legacy. It wasn't armor. It was evidence. But evidence doesn't matter when people are looking for reasons not to believe you. You pretending to be someone you're not. The officer pressed, stepping in closer now. Darius finally spoke. Voice low, calm, deadly clear. "I don't pretend." And that was it. He didn't shout. He didn't explain. He didn't need to. Because in that one sentence was a lifetime of truth. Behind him, the car gleamed. Untouched. Unbelieved. And the cameras. They captured every second. Every word. Every face. Especially the officers, smirking, certain, and unaware that he'd just made the mistake of his career. Just when the tension on the sidewalk felt like it might snap, a voice cut through the noise. "Wait. That man didn't steal anything." Everyone turned. She was small, maybe 5'3", hair pulled into a messy ponytail, red name tag swinging from her Trinity Motors lanyard as she hurried across the street. Rosa Green, 23 years old. Just 3 months into her job at the dealership. The kind of person most folks overlook. Until she speaks. And today, she spoke. "I primped that car," she said, breath short but voice sharp. "It's registered under Darius Jordan. That's the prototype. He signed for it less than an hour ago." The crowd tilted like a wave. People whispered. Someone near the front pointed. "She works there." A man in cargo shorts muttered, "If she's right, these cops just messed up. Bad." Rosa didn't stop. She walked right up to the officers, nerves clearly trembling under her skin, but her eyes locked in. "I was there. I printed the papers. Ran the VIN myself. He owns that car." The older officer stiffened. "Ma'am, this is a police matter," he barked, his tone now strained. "No," she said, standing her ground. "This is a mistake. And everyone here is watching you make it." The younger cop looked at his partner, uncertain now, visibly rattled. Darius remained silent, still cuffed, still composed. But in his eyes, there was something new. Recognition. Not just of Rosa, but of the moment. Because every now and then, someone you don't expect chooses to speak. And it changes everything. A man in the back shouted, "Hey, I'm live on Instagram, over 5,000 people watching. The dealership just confirmed he owns the car." Phones kept rolling. The first officer stepped back, but his jaw was clenched. He wasn't ready to let go of control. Not yet. But the power had shifted, and everyone could feel it. Because a young woman, one no one would have expected to speak up, just called out injustice in real time. And silence was no longer an option. Darius didn't say a word. He didn't need to. He simply turned his head, slow and calm, as if time belonged to him, and reached into the inside pocket of his crumpled blazer. The officer tensed, but Darius moved deliberately. Smooth. Open-handed. Nothing rushed. He pulled out a small black case. Leather. Sleek. Unbranded. With one quiet motion, he removed a single card and placed it flat on the hood of the car. The crowd leaned in. The older officer squinted, scoffed. "What the hell is this supposed to be?" Darius said only 4 words. "You'll want to read it." The officer picked it up. Think stock. Matte finish. Gold lettering embossed deep. His eyes moved across the text, and the smirk on his face disappeared. The name was there, in bold, capitalized font. Darius Miles Jordan. Founder and CEO. Jordan Motors Group. Executive line, confidential use only. The silence hit like thunder. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Wait, that Jordan? As in the electric car company?" Another voice, "He owns the car? Like literally built it. Then the dam broke." "Google him," one man said. "I just did, he's on Forbes. He's real." A young woman shouted, "That's his car. They're cuffing the CEO of the company that made it." The officer's face turned pale. His hand holding the card began to tremble. Rosa stepped closer, her voice now firm. "I told you. That prototype was hand-designed by Mr. Jordan. It's not even on the market yet. No one else in the country drives that model." The younger officer swallowed hard. Darius finally looked him in the eye. "I didn't need to pull rank," he said. "I was going to drive away quietly. But you wouldn't let me." The crowd was locked in now. No one moved. Phones captured every blink, every breath. "You judged the surface," Darius continued. "You saw skin, style, assumed I couldn't belong." His voice wasn't angry, just precise. "You're not the first. But you might be the last to do it without consequence." The older officer tried to speak, stammered something that sounded like protocol. But it was too late. The truth was out. And there was no protocol that could protect him now. Darius stood still, his wrists still bound. But power. It had already left the officer's hands. He turned his head slightly, then nodded to Rosa. "Thank you," he said quietly. Then, with his hands behind his back, he looked at the officer holding his business card. "I'm making a call," he said. "You can't," the officer began. Darius cut in. "Come. I see. I can. And I will." He tilted his head toward his inner pocket. The younger cop hesitated, then reached in gently and retrieved the phone. Darius took it with both hands, wrists still cuffed, and used his thumbprint to unlock the screen. One tap. One name. Detective Raoul Simmons. The phone rang twice. Then a low, sharp voice answered. "Jordan." Darius didn't waste time. "I need you at Trinity Motors. Uptown. Now." A pause. Then, "On my way." The call ended. The officer, still clutching the business card, shifted his feet. A crowd had formed a semicircle. People weren't just filming now, they were broadcasting. Live streams with thousands of viewers. Comment threads exploding in real time. "Dallas PD just cuffed the CEO of Jordan Motors," someone narrated into a phone. "This is blowing up." 5 minutes passed. Then came the SUV. Unmarked. Matte black. Government plates. The door opened. Detective Raoul Simmons stepped out. Late 40s. Dark suit. Press tie. His presence alone shifted the energy. He moved fast. Cut through the crowd. Walked straight to Darius. "Mr. Jordan," he said, nodding. "You all right?" Darius raised his cuffed hands. Simmons turned to the officers. "Who did this?" The older officer cleared his throat. "We were following protocol. He is the CEO of one of the largest auto manufacturers in Texas," Simmons snapped. "You handcuffed him in the street?" The officer looked away. Simmons nodded once. Short. Cold. Uncuff him. The younger officer stepped forward, fumbling slightly. The cuffs clicked open. Darius rotated his wrists slowly. The red marks were visible. The crowd. Dead silent. Simmons turned to his team. Get the chief on the line. Now. One of his aides began dialing. Darius, brushing off his sleeves, looked directly at the older officer. This could have ended differently, he said. But not today. And with that, the scene shifted again. Because justice wasn't coming later. It had arrived. In a suit. With receipts. And a phone that didn't just dial numbers, it dialed power. 48 hours later, the echo of what happened outside Trinity Motors was still rippling through the city. News stations ran the footage on a loop. Headlines screamed, Black CEO wrongfully detained by Dallas PD. Social media had already given it a name, #JordanJustice. But for Darius, this wasn't about trending. It was about accountability. That morning, he walked into Dallas City Hall not as a victim, but as a force. Flanked by 2 legal advisors, a civil rights liaison, and Rosa. Yes, she'd come too. Darius stepped into the chamber like he owned the building. Because, in a way, he did. His company had donated over $5 million to city initiatives in the past 5 years. Youth scholarships, clean energy infrastructure, even police cruiser upgrades. Now, he stood before Police Chief Brenda Ellison, a woman known more for press conferences than presence. She greeted him with a thin smile. Mr. Jordan, we appreciate you coming in. He nodded. Let's skip the pleasantries. The room stilled. I want Officer Richard Vance placed on immediate administrative leave, pending a full investigation into his conduct, Darius said. Clear. Controlled. Ellison's face barely moved. We're already reviewing. No, Darius cut in. Not just reviewing. Auditing. He placed a thick binder on the table. This is a breakdown of your department's traffic stops for the last 12 months. In this district, black drivers are stopped at a rate 6 times higher than white drivers. Ellison shifted. One of the deputies coughed. Darius leaned forward. And last month, one of your officers tackled a 16-year-old black teen outside a mall. No charges. No discipline. Just a footnote. The room was dead quiet. I'm not asking for apologies. I'm asking for change. He stood tall, voice steady. I want an independent, third-party audit of every recorded stop conducted by this department over the last year. I want community reps involved. And I want a new policy requiring de-escalation training and anti-bias evaluations for all uniformed officers. Ellison hesitated. You're asking the lot. No, Darius replied. I'm expecting the bare minimum. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out one final document. Until these demands are met, Jordan Motors is suspending all fleet contracts, vehicle donations, and discounted services to the department. Gasps filled the chamber. That was over 7 figures in frozen support. And just like that, the balance of power shifted. Not through protests. Not through shouting. But through precision. And principle. For a full 10 seconds, no one spoke. The silence in the City Hall chamber was louder than any protest. Darius stood motionless. The words had already landed. No more fleet support. No more electric cruisers. No more subsidized service contracts. No more donations labeled for community outreach. All of it, gone. Chief Ellison finally cleared her throat. Mr. Jordan, we understand your frustration, but it's not frustration, Darius interrupted. It's accountability. He pulled another paper from his folder, set it down gently. This is a notice to redirect the funds that were originally allocated for your department, he said, his voice steady, every syllable measured. We're establishing a new initiative called the Dignity First Fund. He paused. For legal defense, advocacy, and education for victims of racial profiling and unlawful detainment, starting here, in Dallas. Rosa, seated just behind him, let out a quiet breath. The attorneys flanking Darius exchanged subtle nods. And across the room, one community liaison dabbed her eyes with a tissue. The chief's hands curled slightly at the edges of her notepad. How much are we talking? A councilman asked. 5 million, Darius said flatly. Immediately accessible. and matched again next fiscal year. But not a dime will return to this department until every one of these demands is met. The chamber buzzed. Whispers. Shock. Calculations happening in real time. That amount would cripple their modernization efforts. Without Jordan Motors, the department would lose access to nearly 38% of their current electric vehicle infrastructure. It was a hit. A clean one. No threats. No shouting. Just the kind of precision you can't ignore. This isn't vengeance, Darius continued, his gaze fixed on the panel. It's responsibility. I can't stop every incident like mine, but I can make sure the next man cuffed for being too successful while Black has the tools to fight back. He stepped away from the podium, but not before adding one last sentence. You don't get to accept donations from the people you choose not to protect. And with that, he left the chamber. No mic drop. No need. Because the real sound was the scramble behind him. As a city finally realized, they weren't just losing money, they were losing trust. 3 days later, Darius stood in the auditorium of Southside High School. No podium, no media, no security detail. Just a folding chair, a bottle of water, and rows of curious teenage faces, some tired, some skeptical, some wide-eyed. He wasn't wearing a suit. Just a charcoal sweater, jeans, and the same polished brown Oxfords he'd worn when he picked up the car. This wasn't about style. It was about presence. The school principal had introduced him simply, Mr. Darius Jordan, CEO, Dallas native. Here to talk, not lecture. And so, Darius did. He didn't talk about quarterly earnings, or investor meetings, or luxury cars. He talked about walking into rooms where no one expected him to belong. He talked about the weight of silence. He talked about restraint, not as weakness, but as control. And then he paused. He looked at the third row, center seat. A boy in a gray hoodie. Quiet. Head low. You, Darius said gently. The boy looked up, surprised. If someone looks at you and sees less, Darius continued, don't waste time trying to change them. He took a step forward. Spend that energy becoming so good, so undeniable, that they have to see you, even when they don't want to. The room was still. Not out of discomfort. Out of respect. You don't prove your worth by yelling, he said. You prove it by being. By showing up every day and refusing to shrink. By refusing to let the world tell you what success should look like, especially if that picture doesn't include your face. He let that sit. Then added, softer now. Let your legacy speak louder than your anger. Someone clapped in the back. Then another. And another. By the time he finished, even the teachers were standing. It wasn't a standing ovation. It was a quiet one. Earned. Not for the speech, but for the message. Because in that gym, Darius wasn't a CEO. He was proof. Proof that where you start doesn't define where you end. And sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't to fight. It's to lead. That evening, Darius sat alone on a rooftop terrace overlooking downtown Dallas. The skyline shimmered. Neon lights blinked slowly into the night. The noise of the city had softened to a low, distant hum. He wasn't thinking about the headlines. He wasn't thinking about the lawsuit his legal team was finalizing. He was thinking about what his mother used to say. If they try to take your voice, let your silence haunt them. And that day, it did. The videos had gone viral. Millions of views. National coverage. Talk shows. Panels. Hashtags. But what stayed with people was the image of him standing in cuffs, unshaken, unbroken. And later, the way he stood in that city hall room, not with rage, not with noise, but with truth. Measured. Grounded. Undeniable. Because sometimes, power isn't about being the loudest. It's about not needing to be. It's the kind of power that doesn't knock on doors, it walks through them. Darius picked up a folded sheet of paper from the table beside him. It was a handwritten letter. From the boy in the hoodie. Simple words. You made me believe I can be something. I didn't know people like you existed. Now I do. Darius folded the letter gently, slipped it into his coat pocket. Then he stood, straightened his shoulders, and smiled, not for the cameras, not for the press, but for himself. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about legacy. It wasn't about destroying what tried to break you. It was about building something stronger in its place. And sometimes, the most deafening sound in a broken system isn't protest. It's the footsteps of a man walking away, dignity intact, while the world finally listens. Not because he yelled, but because his silence said everything. And they heard it loud and clear.